Good morning and welcome to Matenaer on Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, and Calvin Newtonoff coming to you live from our studio here at Radio Park in Racine. You can always join us. You can call or text. The number is the same, 855-752-4842. You can leave a comment if you're watching on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and what used to be Twitter. Coming up later on today in the 5 o'clock hour with Maggie Dawn. Not only will she have another keyword for you for our multi-state text to win Go for the Green and Gold contest, but she's going to be talking to Luke Baumgartner, a repeat guest from George Washington University, and they're going to talk about online radicalization and extremism
Okay.
with an emphasis on Antifa. Should be a very interesting discussion. Join Maggie Dawn. Her show starts at 4. That's into the 5 o'clock hour. Right now, we are delighted to be joined, excuse me, by State Senator.
You make us for Clem, State Senator.
And also, yes, State Senator Kelda Roys is here. Good morning, Senator. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Great to be with you again.
Well, you made your announcement on our friend and colleague Todd Alba's program that you were jumping into the race for governor. So, Senator, for people who may not know much about you, and tell us a little bit about Kelda Roys.
Well, I was born in Marshfield and spent my early years in rural Taylor County, which, if you're not familiar, it's north of Highway 29. My family lived in a one-room schoolhouse that my parents remodeled after it was vacant for many years. I now represent the Dane County area in the Wisconsin State Senate, where I serve on the Budget Committee. I also previously served in the State Assembly, where I helped fight against Act 10. I'm an attorney and a small business owner, mom and stepmom of 5, and I was the executive director of NARAL Pro-Choice Wisconsin. So I have been in the fight here for Wisconsin alongside all of you and your listeners for 25 years.
It's 25 years, really?
Yeah.
I've done nothing with my life, folks. I'm going to see you later.
Come on. No, getting the word out is probably the most important thing we can be doing. We need to connect with each other, and that's what you do every day.
Well, we are living in such divided times, Senator Roys. How do you come in as governor and try and get things done and appeal to everyone? What would be your first priority if you were elected governor, do you think?
Well, my first and only priority is making sure that Wisconsin is a place where every single family, no matter who you are or where you're from, that you have the freedom to thrive. And, certainly it's about making sure people have good paying jobs that don't just pay the bills, but let you actually build the life you want, right? Give your kids the future you want. Making sure we have affordable housing and childcare, that everyone has access to good health care. And reinvesting in our public schools that have really gotten shortchanged over the last generation. So those are key priorities. And I think, there's so much emphasis on the things that divide us. And that's a really cynical thing that I think the right wing has done with our politics. But when you actually listen to people and you travel all over the state, as I have, for
Right.
more than 20 years, you find that we've got a lot in common. People really do want the same things. And the policies that I'm supporting are not controversial. They are supported by the vast majority of Wisconsinites. They want someone who can get it done.
Well, and I think, and we've talked about this a lot, especially when it comes to public schools, most people love their own public school. There is this perception it's that other public school that's the problem. But I like my kids' teachers. I like my kids, and so I do think that there's wide support for public schools if it's in your own backyard.
You're absolutely right. And the reality is that the vast majority of kids in the state go to public school, and it shouldn't matter how wealthy your parents are, what kind of neighborhood you could afford to live in, how rural your community is. You deserve a great public school. And we need to focus not just on making sure that teachers have the resources they need, and schools do too, but also that our kids are equipped to thrive. So it's not just more money, but it's actually better schools for our kids.
It's really disturbing to me, and I want to say this goes back at least 20 years, that we expect teachers to pay out of their own pocket for school supplies. When did this become so normalized that we just don't have the money to give paper and rulers to our kids?
Right. And I think about every August, I'm always in a mad dash to get school supplies for my kids. And, I try to get as many things off those teacher wish lists as possible. I send my kids with extra supplies because I know there are families out there that can't, that will really break the bank for them. And the reality is, this is why I've been such a champion for healthy school meals for all, right? Because every kid will do better and learn better if
Yes.
they have good, nutritious, healthy food. That a lot of it can come right from our own farmers here in Wisconsin. This is a win-win. And think about the burden that takes off of working parents, right? Even if you can afford all the grocery cost, trying to get your kids fed is really important. And school supplies is one piece of that. But we don't expect firefighters or police officers to spend thousands of dollars on their training, to go to extra schooling, to buy all their own supplies, to, chip in for the fire engine.
Right.
And yet we somehow have normalized this with teachers. And when we see now ICE agents being recruited, people that have been rejected from police forces all over the country, people that are not qualified to be in the military, and they're being offered six-figure salaries and massive bonuses. Ooh, that's a kick
Yeah.
in the gut to the teachers.
Absolutely. And I want to take the education component and attach it to something bigger. And I want to reference something that when you came to our show a couple months ago speaking about the Wisconsin state budget and the news had come out, your colleague Senator Hesselbein got in the room, talked to Republicans, Governor Evers signed it. It seemed like we're like, "Oh, here we go." And you came on our show and you're like, "No." And I was like, "Oh, no. What happened?" And really I want to thank you and also Representative Hong for being so vocal. And there were others too, but the two of you being so vocal on what you did not like about this budget. It passed. It needed to pass. We didn't want to go back to old spending. But I guess the question I have for you is your non-support of this budget. What are you going to do in the governor's office when you get your mind around the budget as far as being governor? How are you going to fight for the things that you feel we all as Wisconsinites need in the next biennium?
Well, for me, it's really about what are our priorities, and the budget is where you show that. And I will say, we've got a lot of good Democrats thinking about running for governor, but I'm the only one that has served on the finance committee, and knowledge of that state budget is incredibly important for our next governor, because we're going to have a really short window of time in which to make real change and actually invest in our kids. So for me, it really is looking at the fact that our kids have not gotten an inflationary increase in their schools in a generation, in 15 years. They're still not recovered from the deep and devastating cuts that Scott Walker made.
Yep.
And, the other piece of it is we are shoveling billions of dollars of our taxpayer money to private, unaccountable voucher schemes, and private education is fine, but taxpayers shouldn't be footing the bill. And the vast majority of families that are taking advantage of those vouchers are people whose kids were already in private school. The
Yep.
parents were paying, and now
Yep.
the taxpayers are footing the bill for wealthy people who want to send their kids off into religious schools. And I think, that offends a lot of Wisconsinites, because we know that every kid deserves a great public school, but we can't continue to fund two school systems, especially when we've been shortchanging our public school kids.
If you're just joining us, State Senator Kelda Roys is our guest. She is running for governor of Wisconsin, and there is a tracker about
Yes.
how much we spend on public and private schools.
Yes, the Wisconsin. I want to get the actual name correct here. It is the I'm sorry. You put me on the spot.
Yeah, I surprised him with
I will get it in the show notes. It's a tracker from the Wisconsin Education Action Network. If I'm getting that name wrong, I apologize. But what they do is they allow you to drop down into your specific school district and find out how much of your tax dollars are being siphoned. And I'm using that word siphoned deliberately into the voucher program. And another thing too, State Senator, it's not only people who children are already in those schools, but it's also to families who can certainly afford those schools too. So they're getting free education.
Well, and the piece that blows my mind the most is that there is no oversight body for these schools. They don't have to report to a higher standard. There's no one overseeing their graduation rates, their curriculum rates. They don't have to do the same kind of reporting that public schools do, and yet we're giving them taxpayer money. I don't.
And they don't have to follow the same laws either. I mean,
Right.
these private schools, they can discriminate against students, right?
Against
Can you imagine?
anybody.
Against teachers in the employment context, and their teachers don't have to have the same kinds of licensure and educational requirements. And so, again, I think parents can make whatever choice they want to, but the idea that taxpayers should simply foot the bill for wealthy families to send their kids to private school is just doesn't pass the smell test.
And if
Um,
this has been tried in numerous other states, I want to say Arkansas jumped in big on school vouchers. I believe Arkansas has also done the same. And there have been reports about this, specifically about the number of people who, as you pointed out, Senator, can afford private schools, already had their kids in private schools. They were paying for it. The vast majority of these people are the ones who are getting the benefits,
that's
who don't
exactly
need them, who
Yeah.
don't
right.
need them.
Right.
And
And I think about the fact that all of us want our kids to have a great education. I mean, we want our kids to have more opportunities than we did. It starts with our public schools, and our kids deserve that investment.
And I think something going back to what you said, Jane, too, people, the people love their public schools. They love them so much that they vote to raise their own property taxes for them.
Right.
And I've said this before, and I will continue to say this. I do not have children. I do not have a direct stake in my public school system in Kenosha, but I voted to raise my taxes because I understand the effect, impact, and the long-term investment of having good schools in your community and how it comes back to benefit you as a taxpayer. So I voted yes. It did not go through because I think, honestly, some taxpayers are saying, why do I have to keep doing this? And it's, as both of you were saying, is because it's been systematically choked out and suffocated by one side of the aisle, who, by the way, and I always say this to Robin Voss, if you're listening, the greatest increase in a generation doesn't mean anything to me when you barely gave them any money in the first place. When you give them $10 one year and you give them 15, that's not worth bragging about. And that's what you did to education, including 0 K to 12 increases. So sorry,
Right.
let me take a moment.
They dug a 10-foot hole, they threw 3-4 feet of dirt in, and gave themselves a pat on the back. Give me a break.
Exactly. Yep.
Right? Let's
Well,
be honest about what's happening. And the property tax thing is real. These divisive cycles of referendums and forcing school districts and frankly our local governments to go to
Mhm.
taxpayers and say, please raise your own taxes. That is really unfair. And it pits neighbor against neighbor because property taxes are too high in the state because of Republican policies. Republican politicians have hoarded billions of dollars at the state level. They have left revenue on the table by keeping cannabis illegal. Meanwhile, other states have legalized it. They have shoveled our tax dollars to vouchers and to big corporations and the wealthy, and are shortchanging our kids and forcing you, property taxpayers and homeowners and renters, to foot the bill. And it's just not okay.
Well, and I think the biggest example, at least for me, on how the government has not been adequately funding municipalities, the city of Brookfield had to do this, people. The city of Brookfield had to bring a referendum. Brookfield is a pretty wealthy community, and even they were like, yeah, we don't have enough money. This has been a problem. We're going to continue our conversation with Wisconsin State Senator Kelda Roys. She is running for governor of our great state. We'll continue our conversation on the other side. Stay close. You are listening to Matenaer on Air. This is the Civic Media Radio Network, and we'll be right back. Good morning. Welcome back to Matenaer on Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, Dr. Slide on the board, coming to you live from Radio Park in Racine. You can join us, call or text at 855-752-4842. Leave a comment if you're watching on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and what used to be Twitter. Don't forget our multi-state text to win. Go for the green and gold contest is underway. Every day we're playing for $200 in cash.
Oh, boy.
A lot of folks, we could all use an extra $200 right now in gold jewelry.
I
And
could
then-
really use some gold jewelry.
I know. And then a great grand prize. Your next chance to enter via the Civic Media app only is coming up in the 11 o'clock hour with Tom Hartman, so stick around for that. Right now, we are joined by State Senator Kelda Roys, who has her hat in the ring to run for Wisconsin governor.
And State Senator, I saw an opinion piece come across the Cap Times 2 days ago from John Nichols, and this applies to the congressional race for Tom Tiffany's seat as far as his running, but I think this applies to what you are talking about, especially from where you come from, which is the title is Democrats Should Fight for the North. And I think that in the past few years, people have realized, oh, Madison, Milwaukee, and Green Bay aren't the only Democrats who vote. I think we've seen an importance of finding out what those folks out in the North, it meant not even if they're Democrats, just what people are talking about, because they can get left behind because people, Democrats can sometimes say, farmers, they'll never vote for me.
Why should I go there?
Rural people, they'll never vote for me. So you're from you're from the North and you hear those conversations. What do you hear from those individuals? And tell the listeners why it is important to fight for the northern area of Wisconsin.
I think we need to fight for everyone in Wisconsin, no matter who
Mhm.
you are or where you're from.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people out there who are struggling, that have been betrayed by Donald Trump and by Republicans in Washington. And they have every reason to be angry and upset because he promised to lower costs, and everything that he has done has stabbed them in the back, right? He's raising costs. The tariff taxes are costing families thousands of dollars more in added cost for items. Our farmers are suffering. Meanwhile, he's spending $20 billion to bail out an Argentinian
Yeah.
dictator and help their soybean farmers
Mhm.
who are competing against ours, who now can't sell their soybeans to China because of retaliatory tariffs and the chaos Trump is causing. So there's a lot out there. There are people who will vote for us. They will listen to us, but we have to go and show up. And, I think we have to, the tone sometimes that Democrats use to campaign, I think is real off-putting to people. And you have to be willing to welcome people who think differently from you. I mean,
Mhm.
that's kind of a, Midwestern value is like we take care of our neighbors but we don't get up in their business and
Yeah.
we live
That's
and let
right.
live.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
sometimes, Democrats, or especially like on the left, you get a little bit of, you know, telling people a little bit how to live and how to think. And I just, that's never been my deal. I just,
Yeah.
I'm really a live and let live kind of person. I want you to have health care, whether you like me or not. And I want your kids to have a good school, and I want your roads to be well paved so you can get your, milk to the cheese plant, regardless of whether you vote for me or not. And I think, we've kind of, we need to show up in these places,
Mhm.
and we need to listen carefully to what people are saying, and they have every right to be angry, and we can help them.
Well, and I would like to think that over the last couple of years, and especially when we had Ben Wickler as the head of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, there did seem to be a lot more outreach and a lot more people on the ground in some of these areas where maybe Democrats would not have traditionally campaigned. So I do
Yeah.
think that there's more, right? There's been a greater effort to try and do some groundwork there.
And when you see our rural areas in Wisconsin, they are not as red as in other kind of similar states. And there is, remember, Wisconsin has a great history of being a progressive state.
Mhm.
So a state that really has fought back against billionaires and barons and, the kind of corrupt uh, politics that we are seeing now out of Washington. Wisconsin was one of the first places to fight back and say, no, people actually deserve power in our political system, not big corporations, not dollars. And I think we can do that again. We can reclaim that mantle, and invest in our communities, and especially in rural communities that have really been left behind.
I think you bring up a very important point too, in as far as when it comes to democratic politics, the inflexibility that they can show towards those who disagree with them, and then we'll have sometimes the temerity to say, "Well, the Republicans are so inflexible and immutable." Well, we all have our own biases, and it's a time right now, especially in these times, to sit back and listen to people tell us about their problems and why they think the way they do. We can't promise to change
Mhm.
their minds, but what you can do is promise at least to listen.
And I learned this, being on the front lines of the abortion rights movement, in my early 20s, right? I I got to hear from so many different people who had a wide range of opinions about abortion, but I never shied away from going on Fox News or going on Christian radio because I think it's really important to say, I respect the fact that you disagree with me on this. It's
Mhm.
okay to have deeply held beliefs that are different from me. I've got my values, and I don't want to regulate what's going on in your life. And here's why I don't want this to be regulated, because it is personal, right? It shouldn't be the
Absolutely.
government. And you
Yep.
can win people on that argument, even if they disagree.
State Senator Kelda Roys running for Wisconsin governor. You have many, many, many months ahead, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Oh,
We would love to have you back, of
please.
course. Thank you so much for your time, Senator. We really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Great to be with you again.
Have a good day.
You
News is coming up next, and then we're going to lighten it up with a little audio sorbet. That's all on the way. Stay close. You are listening to Matenaer on air. This is the Civic Media Radio Network.